Namaskar, I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Welcome to the first edition of Global Scan in 2020. In the next half an hour, we will together scan through the big developments from across the world this week. Now, in what could lead to a major escalation of tensions in West Asia between United States and Iran, top Iranian general was killed in US airstrikes in Baghdad ordered by President Trump. Iran has warned of severe revenge for the act. In other news, fresh protests take place in Hong Kong. Bushfires continue to scorch Australia. All that and more. Let's begin with the headlines first. US confirms killing of Iranian general in Baghdad airstrike. Rouhani says Iran more determined to resist US after Soleimani's death. 62-year-old spearheaded Iranian military operations in the Middle East as head of Iran's elite Quds force. US President Donald Trump blames Iran for orchestrating attack on US embassy in Baghdad, holds Tehran responsible, sends additional forces following violent demonstrations outside the compound by protesters and militia fighters. Brexit will mark new chapter for UK, says Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Hopes the country would move forward united after it leaves the EU on 31st January. Negotiation over its future economic relationship with the 27-member bloc are yet to begin. New South Wales declares 7-day state of emergency as Australia's deadly bushfires rage. Australian military embark on rescue missions as deadly wildfires threaten to burn towns to the ground. Navy evacuates around 1,000 tourists and residents trapped in the fire-ravaged town of Malakuta on the Victoria coast. Sudanese court sentences 29 intelligence officers to death for the torture and killing of a teacher. Ahmad Al-Khair, 36-year-old, died in custody in February following his arrest for taking part in protests against then-President Omar al-Bashir's government. Let's now look at news from Asia. The United States has confirmed the killing of Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani, head of the elite Quds force and the architect of Iran's spreading military influence in the Middle East. In an airstrike on Friday at Baghdad airport, top Iraqi militia commander Abu Mahdi al-Mohandis, an advisor to Soleimani, was also killed in the attack that was authorized by US President Donald Trump. Following Soleimani's assassination, the US Department of State released a video where Iraqis can be seen dancing in the street. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo posted the video alongside a statement saying Iraqis dancing in the street for freedom, thankful that General Soleimani is no more.
ودم الشهداء والضحايا والشهداء العراقيين كلهم طلعت اليوم.
Soleimani's killing marks a dramatic escalation in the regional shadow war between Iran and the United States and its allies, principally Israel and Saudi Arabia, which could quickly rush up tit-for-tat attacks. President Hassan Rouhani said the assassination would make Iran more decisive in its resistance to the US, while Iran's Revolutionary Guard said anti-US forces would exact revenge across the Muslim world. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei also vowed harsh revenge. In a statement posted on Iranian government's website, Rouhani said that Soleimani's martyrdom by the aggressor and criminal America has saddened the heart of the nation of Iran and all the nations of the region. The president added that this vile and cowardly act is another sign of America's desperation and weakness in the region. Global oil prices jumped 4% after airstrike killed the Iranian commander. Iran has been logged in a long conflict with the United States that escalated sharply last week with an attack on the US embassy in Iraq by pro-Iranian militiamen following a US air raid on Kataib Hezbollah militia founded by the Mohandis. Now, on the last day of 2019, thousands of protesters and militia fighters thronged the gates of US Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, threw stones and lit fires in fury against the United States airstrikes in Iraq. Earlier on Sunday, December 29th, US planes had attacked bases belonging to an Iranian-backed militia, a move that risks drawing Iraq further into a proxy conflict between Washington and Tehran at a time when mass protests are challenging Iraq's political system. Protesters and militia fighters smashed windows and graffitied the US Embassy compound in Baghdad as armed US security forces looked on from within. US ambassador to Iraq and some staff were evacuated from their embassy. Outside of the embassy, protesters threw stones at the gate while others chanted, "No, no America, no, no Trump." Iraqi special forces were deployed around the main gate to prevent them from entering the embassy compound. After the violent protest at Baghdad embassy, United States deployed about 750 soldiers to the Middle East in the region. Video released by the Department of Defense showed United States Marine Corps Ospreys dropping off special purpose Marines at the embassy grounds. US President Donald Trump says he does not want or foresee war with Iran after he earlier threatened to retaliate against the country following violent protests led by Iranian-backed militia at the US Embassy in Baghdad.
Well, I think it's been handled very well. The Marines came in. We had some great warriors come in and do a fantastic job, and they were there instantaneously as soon as we heard. I used the word immediately. They came immediately, and it's in great shape. As you know, this will not be a Benghazi. Benghazi should never have happened. This will never, ever be a Benghazi. But we have some of our greatest warriors there. They got in there very quickly. As soon as we saw there was a potential for problem, they got in, and there was no problem whatsoever. I also want to thank the Iraqi government. They really stepped up. I spoke to the Prime Minister today. I thanked him, but they stepped up very nicely.
And we'll try and simplify the developments in Iraq now and also understand the genesis of the tensions between the US and Iran. Next, we'll look at the sequence of events that have taken place in the past few days. So what has happened is that Iran's General Qasem Soleimani that we just mentioned has been killed by US forces in Iraq. On Friday morning, this update came. Iran says he's a highly decorated general in Iran. He says that Iran says General Qasem Soleimani is a martyr, and he was in fact instrumental in the fight against ISIS, and he's also responsible for much of the influence that Iran has in the region. So General Qasem Soleimani is killed by the United States forces, a big setback for Iran. US meanwhile says that the strike is aimed at deterring the future Iranian attack plans, and according to the United States, General Soleimani was in fact instrumental in the militia that has been attacking the US and the allied bases in the region. Meanwhile, US Embassy in Baghdad, this took place on Tuesday. US Embassy in Baghdad is attacked by demonstrators. These are militias. US says they're also motivated and supported by Iran. And this attack takes place on Tuesday. The furious attackers over deaths of the militia members in the US airstrikes. So this attack took place on Sunday. We're looking at the sequence of events that take place. So this major attack takes place at the Baghdad US Embassy. US Marines are sent to as reinforcement. We showed you the visuals as well, sent to Baghdad Embassy to boost the security. They're in fact airdropped in the compound of the embassy. There is no large-scale plans to evacuate the embassy. The ambassador and other key staff were safe, and they were evacuated for some time, but no large-scale evacuation of the embassy. What happened on Sunday is important. 25 militia fighters died in the US bombing of their bases in Iraq. So the protesters at the Baghdad embassy were saying that they are protesting to revenge against the US bombing on the militias. The United States says that Kataib-e-Hezbollah militia, an Iranian-backed force, it is, according to the US, a terrorist organization. Their leader is a global terrorist, and the attacks, 25 militia were killed, were motivated by this fight against terror. This is what the US says. Now, the US also says militia attacked, the same militia that we're talking about, attacked the Iraqi bases, hosting US-led coalition forces a few days ago. In fact, a US contractor was also killed in such an attack. So it really takes us to the problematic ties that exist between the United States, between US and Iran, and also in the middle lies Iraq. Remember, a few months ago, in fact, past couple of years, United States forces have been training the Iraq forces to fight against the ISIS. But the Shia government in Iraq also has links and is also finds a strong influence and support from Iran. And US-Iran, we know, for decades have been adversaries. And the recent government move by President Donald Trump hasn't really much changed the situation. So this particular attack and the killing of General Soleimani is likely to further escalate the tensions that exist between US and Iran, and in the midst also lies the developments in Iraq that is facing a civil war. Moving on, Hong Kong police announced on January 2nd that they conducted more than 280 arrests in New Year's Day protests after what started as a peaceful pro-democracy march. Tens and thousands have spiraled into chaotic scenes with the police firing tear gas to disperse the crowds. Police said on Thursday they arrested 420 people over the New Year holiday, most of them New Year's Day, with 287 of them in one sweep for illegal assembly, including a 12-year-old. The tension on January 1st rose after some arrests were made in Wan Chai Bars district near a branch of global banking group HSBC, which has been target of protester anger in the recent weeks. When the scuffles broke out, large number of protesters rushed to the scene, while other protesters formed human chains to pass them the various supplies, forcing police to bring in their own reinforcements. Eric Lai, one of the leaders of the Civil Human Rights Front that they organized the march, criticized the police dispersing the crowd at such short notice and said they had arrested protesters unreasonably. The arrests take the total to about 7,000 since the protests in the city escalated in June over a now withdrawn bill that would have allowed extradition to the mainland China. Let's now look at news from the Americas. US Democratic presidential contender Joe Biden said there would be no legal basis for Republicans to subpoena his testimony in President Donald Trump's impeachment trial, clarifying remarks from Friday that drew criticism. And he said, "I want to clarify something I said yesterday. In my 40 years in public life, I've always complied with the lawful order, and in my 8 years as vice president, my office, unlike Donald Trump and Mike Pence, cooperated with legitimate congressional oversight requests. But I'm not just going to pretend that there is any legal basis for Republican subpoenas for my testimony in the impeachment trial." That's a tweet that Joe Biden sent. He said, "That is the point I was making yesterday, and I reiterate." And some legal experts and commentators has criticized Biden for his remarks to the Iowa newspaper, noting that White House's refusal to comply with congressional subpoenas was part of the reason why Trump had been impeached. Let's now move to news from Europe. Some update from UK and the impending Brexit. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called upon the nation to maintain unity as the debt for the separation from the European Union draws closer. He spoke on big plans for boosting the social infrastructure in the UK. Regarding Brexit, it is not just about exit or leaving the EU. The future relationship between the governments and peoples of the two regions is also yet to be finalized. Trade, immigration and more. It continues to be a challenging road ahead for Boris Johnson.
The UK is on the verge of a new chapter, with Prime Minister Boris Johnson all set to finish the job by delivering Brexit within weeks. In his New Year message, the Prime Minister said that he hoped the country would move forward united after it leaves the European Union on January 31st.
We have a wonderful opportunity to unite as a country and move forward together. I want you to know that I'm going to be working my socks off to deliver on your priorities and to make this the year that we unleash Britain's potential. Of course, we start this month by getting Brexit done. On the 31st, we will be out of the EU, free to chart our own course as a sovereign nation, taking back control of our money, our laws, our borders and our trade. And with that certainty, we will restore confidence for people and businesses and help unleash a pent-up tidal wave of investment. But that's just the start. We have a packed, ambitious agenda ahead. As the people's government, delivering the people's priorities, boosting the NHS with the biggest cash ingestion in its history, renewing our schools and improving standards in the classroom, backing our scientists in everything from gene therapy to electric vehicles, better infrastructure to bring people together, making our streets safer, our environment cleaner and our union stronger. A Britain where we are uniting, levelling up and spreading opportunity to every corner of our country. We have so much to look forward to in 2020 with the Summer Olympics in Tokyo, Euro 2020, the Games in London and Glasgow, the final at Wembley, and the UN Climate Change Summit also in Glasgow, where we will lead the way in finding the solutions to protect our planet.
While the UK is set to leave the European Union's institutions on 31st January, negotiations over its future economic relationship with the 27-member bloc are yet to begin, with the experts saying that they will be far tougher than those over the terms of UK's exit. Following its departure, the UK will enter a transition period until December 31st, 2020. During this period, the UK's trading relationship with the European Union will remain the same, while the two sides negotiate a free trade deal. At the same time, many other aspects of UK's future relationship with the European Union, including law enforcement, data sharing and security, will need to be agreed. If a trade deal is ready in time, the UK's new relationship with the European Union can begin immediately after the transition. If not, UK faces the prospect of having to trade with no agreement in force. This would mean checks and tariffs on UK goods travelling to the European Union.
From UK to France, French hardline union CGT called on January 1st for more strikes in France this month after President Emmanuel Macron pledged to push through an overhaul of the pension system following weeks of nationwide strikes by the trade unions. Macron said in a traditional New Year's Eve address on December 31st that he expected his government to quickly find a compromise with unions on the reform, but without departing from the principles laid out by the ministers. Unions are trying to force the former investment banker to abandon his overhaul of France's pension system, with nationwide strikes since December 5th that have crippled the public transport. Martinez, who has also called on his union to strike at oil refineries, said his organisation would take part in a meeting between unions and the government on January 7th. Moving on to the deadly bushfires of Australia that made headlines in most of 2019, they continue to rage in the new year as well. New South Wales has declared emergency. The deadly fires have burned down over 1,000 homes and destroyed nearly 4 million hectares of land. As we speak, over 200 fires are scorching across the southeastern states of New South Wales and Victoria. Here's more.
Australia is battling the worst fires in a decade. The deadly wildfires are showing no signs of stopping. The New South Wales state government declared a state of emergency on 2nd January, giving authorities the power to forcibly evacuate people and take control of services. Tens of thousands of holiday makers and residents raced to evacuate popular seaside towns on Australia's east coast, fleeing ahead of advancing bushfires. Thousands of people are fleeing a vast tourist lead zone in New South Wales, with supplies running low in some cut-off towns. It's been called the largest relocation out of the region ever. Fueled by searing temperatures and high winds, more than 200 fires are now burning across the southeastern states of New South Wales and Victoria, threatening several towns. Bushfires so far this season have razed more than 4 million hectares of bushland and destroyed more than 1,000 homes, including 381 homes destroyed on the south coast just this week. Casualties are also rising due to the devastating bushfires. Blazes have torn through bushland, wooded areas and national parks like the Blue Mountains. Australia's largest cities have also been affected, including Melbourne and Sydney. Fires have damaged homes in the outer suburbs and thick plumes of smoke have blanketed the urban centre. Efforts are underway to clear roads, restore power and conduct back-burning operations to thin out bushland near fire fronts. NSW Premier Gladys Berejiklian said authorities were working to restore communications with areas that have been cut off by the fires. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
And let's now look at news from Africa. A Sudanese court sentenced 29 members of the National Intelligence Service to death by hanging on December 30th over the killing of a teacher in detention in February during protests that led to the overthrow of former President Omar al-Bashir. The group that spearheaded the protest welcomed the ruling, the first to deliver sentences over crackdowns and demonstrations in the months before and after Bashir was toppled in April. Prosecuting members of the intelligence services is seen as a test of how Sudan's transitional government will go to erase Bashir's legacy and challenge the security apparatus. 13 defendants were sentenced to prison terms and a further 4 were acquitted in the ruling, which could face several stages of appeal. The judge listed 27 agents from Kassala, capital of eastern Kassala state, who received death sentences. Another 2 agents from Qasam al-Kirba, the town in Kassala state where the teacher Khair was killed, were also sentenced to death, a lawyer informed. Khair's death became a rallying point during 16 weeks of protest against Bashir's rule. His family said security officials initially claimed he had died of poisoning. 2 days later, a state investigation found he had died of injuries from beating. Hundreds of people rallied outside the court in Ombudsman, where the verdict was delivered on Monday, some waving national flags or holding pictures of Khair. They broke into celebration as the ruling came. And now let's see some more important stories from across the world in Speed News.
Taiwan's parliament has passed an anti-infiltration bill to combat perceived threats from China. The law has been passed to block the political interference from China less than 2 weeks before elections. The bill gives legal teeth to efforts to stop China's funding activities on the island, such as lobbying or election campaigns. It carries a maximum penalty of 7 years in jail and will take effect after Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen signs it into law in January. The bill was passed despite strong opposition from the lawmakers. Charles Blay-Good, an ally of former Ivory Coast President Laurent Gbagbo, has been sentenced in absentia to 20 years in prison by a court in Abidjan for his role in the civil war that followed the 2010 presidential election. Gbagbo and Blay-Good were acquitted in January by the International Criminal Court in The Hague of charges of crimes against humanity during the violence in which some 3,000 people were killed. The Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for the massive truck blast in Somalia over the weekend that left at least 90 people dead. A spokesman for Al-Shabaab said that the bombing targeted a convoy of Somali and Turkish forces. The extremist group has regularly carried out bombings during its more than a decade-long fight to topple the UN-backed Somali government. Peru's Sabancaya volcano, located in the southern department of Arequipa, exploded early on Tuesday morning, sending ashes and smoke 3,000 meters into the sky, according to the Geophysical Institute of Peru. Due to the ashes, residents were urged to cover their faces and any standing water receptacles in order to avoid contact with the volcanic material. Sabancaya is currently going through a period of eruptive activity, which started in November of 2016, according to volcanologists. Floods submerged parts of the Indonesian capital of Jakarta on the first day of the new year after torrential rainfall overnight, killing at least 4 people and forcing about 19,000 people to evacuate. In another incident, Indonesia's active Anak Krakatau volcano erupted, spewing ashes into the sky as high as 1 kilometer. The authorities warned the public to steer clear at a radius of 2 kilometers from the crater, with its alert level remaining second lowest on Indonesia's 4-level scale. 2 people died in a plane crash at the Johnston County Executive Airport on Tuesday, according to the Kansas Highway Patrol. The cause of the crash remains under investigation. It was not clear how many people were on board. British police have charged a man with criminal damage after a painting reportedly by Spanish master Pablo Picasso was attacked at a London gallery over the weekend. The incident happened on the 28th of December at the Tate Modern Gallery when Picasso's 1944 painting, Bust of a Woman, worth some £20 million, was slashed.
And time now for all the action from the world of sports in SportsScan.
And the best men's player of the year is Cristiano Ronaldo.
Portugal's Cristiano Ronaldo was named Dubai Globe Soccer's Men's Player of the Year, while England's Lucy Bronze was named Women's Player of the Year 2019. Coach of the Year was awarded to Liverpool's Jurgen Klopp after he led his side to the 2018-19 UEFA Champions League title. Liverpool was showered with awards as it also won the Best Club of the Year, and Alisson Becker was named Best Goalkeeper of the Year. In the regional award, Murabda Razak Hamdallah was given the Best Arab Player of the Year award. Arsenal secured their first Premier League win under the new manager Mikel Arteta as they beat Manchester United 2-0 at the Emirates. Nicolas Pepe was able to give his side the lead less than 10 minutes into the game before Socrates made it 2 just before half-time, with United being unable to hit back in the second half. The victory has moved Arsenal into 10th position in the Premier League table. Tokyo 2020 Olympics organizers said that they will take emergency countermeasures after asbestos was found at the water polo venue, the local media has reported. The Tokyo government found the asbestos and fireproof material sprayed on parts of the structure supporting the Tokyo Tatsumi International Swimming Center's roof. Asbestos, which was once...
It's time for Cinema Scan, where we bring you all the buzz from the world of cinema and entertainment.
It's real hard to break in.
Eddie Murphy, Jamie Lee Curtis. For them, the new year started off with their names in the nomination list of Hollywood's most prestigious awards. Veteran actor and comedian Eddie Murphy is set to receive the Lifetime Achievement honor at the 25th Critics' Choice Awards in a ceremony on the 12th of January. The Oscar-nominated actor will be felicitated for his extraordinary roles over the years. Most recently, his portrayal of Rudy Ray Moore in Netflix's Dolomite Is My Name.
Could be everywhere all at once. Let's bring Dolomite to the screen.
On the other hand, veteran actor Jamie Lee Curtis will be recognized at the 2020 Society of Camera Operators Awards celebration. Curtis will receive the group's Lifetime Achievement Award, President's Award, during a ceremony on the 18th of January. Curtis has many iconic films to her credit over the decades, including Halloween, A Fish Called Wanda, True Lies, and many more.
Justin Bieber says he is cancelling the rest of his world tour.
This year, Justin Bieber is ready to delight his fans, this time not with music. The pop sensation is opening up about his creative and personal life through a 10-part documentary, ahead of a career comeback after 3 years away from the spotlight. YouTube has announced that Bieber's first ever documentary series, Justin Bieber Seasons, will launch on the video platform on the 27th of January. American singer and songwriter Mariah Carey broke another record and became the first with #1 hits in 4 separate decades. The singer beat out the likes of Michael Jackson, Madonna and Britney Spears. Global Scan Desk, DD India.
And as we conclude this edition of Global Scan, we leave you with these images of New Year celebrations from across the globe. See you next week. Goodbye for now.